Good afternoon. I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter Schools Association. Welcome to our weekly Tuesday webinar. Many of you reached out to me following last Tuesday's webinar. I want to thank you. I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the passion that characterizes the charter movement. Now more than ever, we need both. So thank you very much. And continue to reach out because we have created a new series at the New York Charter Schools Association called Race, Justice, and Equity, a series of conversations where we will address issues related to those topics. The first in the monthly events will be this Thursday, the 11th at 4 p.m. Many of you should have received an email with the flyer regarding the webinar. It will feature Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. and Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie. We'll also, during the conversation, we'll discuss civic engagement and race. Dr. Dana Collins, President-elect of the New York State Association of Black Psychologists, will join us to discuss racial trauma and healing. So we look forward to the engaging conversation on Thursday and to the conversation that will go forward in the series. And I hope to see you Thursday. If you'd like to suggest topics for future conversations in the series, please reach out to me. In addition, a quick note that we will be hosting topic-specific webinars on June 18th, focusing on philanthropy in the current context. And on the 25th, we will host the staff of the New York City District Charter Collaborative to share lessons learned in their work as their program regrettably has come to an end, or will come to an end. And finally, before we turn to the updates and questions with the authorizers, I also want to take the opportunity to announce and celebrate the outcome of yesterday's Regents meeting. Among many positive charter actions, the unanimous decision to reverse the May vote on Buff Psi and to grant them a full five-year renewal, including their ability to serve third and fourth grades, was a true victory for the charter schools across the state. Since we have first shared this issue last week, hundreds of charter leaders, teachers, and parents, I believe, I don't know the exact number, but maybe close to 800 or more maybe, have taken action to call on the Regents and elected officials to support not only Buff Psi, but the fair application of law and policy to charter decision-making. So thank you very much to everyone who participated in that effort. Congratulations, Buff Psi. I'm relieved and grateful that the parents can send their children to the school of their choice. Great outcome. More to do, so stay tuned. Many of the Regents referenced the calls and letters they received, and the statewide advocacy clearly influenced the outcome. One of the things that came up in the meeting, if those of you have watched it, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you who didn't, please check on our website. We will post, if we haven't already, the meeting. And we're going to do that in the future. We're going to show the future meetings so that everyone can see what goes on in the Regents. You've heard some of the comments, the questions, some of the controversy, and truly the near misses and some of the proposed amendments that the Regents made during that time. So please check our website. We had a Facebook watch party. Hundreds of people watched during the meeting. We'll do the same thing again. We'll send you text alerts when you should join the Regents and watch what's going on. We highly recommend that you do that. Again, thank you, everyone, for your support. Okay, all that's out of the way. Now let's turn to updates from the authorizers, and then we'll take questions in the Q&A. I am joined today by Susie Carello, Executive Director of the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, David Frank, Executive Director of Charter Schools Office at NYSID, Angeli Matos, Executive Director and Policy and Operations at New York City Department of Education, as well as Aaron Cochran, Managing Director in the same office, and Corey Callahan from the New York City Charter Center. Welcome, everyone. So we'll start with David, Susie, and Aaron. Thank you, as always, for joining us today. Let's start to find out whether or not you would like to share an update. We'll start with Aaron.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to, again, be wearing my authorizer hat with you. So no big updates from the authorizer side. From our vantage point, I know to get my data and ops hat back on a little bit, I know that we've been getting a lot of questions from schools about how to be reporting Regents waivers. I see something in the chat. And so we are working on that guidance on how to be reporting the Regents waivers that will be submitted to the state and stored in ATS. so that as students move, those waivers follow them. So look for more guidance coming out of our office, but I just want to do a big giant plug that schools should not wait for that guidance before graduating students in ATS. The reporting the waiver is not a dependency, but we will be sharing more guidance as we have it. So no big authorizer updates from us, but I know that the Regents waiver is a big burning question.
Okay, great, thank you. Susie, do you have an update? You're muted. Hi, Susie, you're muted.
Happy Tuesday. My apologies. I hope everyone is doing well. Just a couple of things. We are finalizing the data that the SUNY charter schools provided us in our phone calls in April and May. We'll be sharing that out with the SUNY Charter Schools Committee, SUNY Trustees Charter Schools Committee at our last meeting of the school year later this week. It's on Thursday. A couple of tidbits. I was really amazed to know that in April, we have about 104,000 students enrolled across all of your schools that are SUNY authorized this year. And in April, there were 474 students that you collectively were having a hard time locating. And by the time that we spoke to folks in May, 100% of the students had been contacted and were engaged in some form of instruction and communication and support with the families. And in such cases where I know so many of you did a lot of scrambling in terms of getting devices and connectivity, and a lot of that data about all of your results is going to come out probably from the Credo survey. So I thought that was an extraordinary statistic. And the other piece that we got from our 2 phone calls, which again will get a little bit more clarity with the Credo data, but in April, in the first round of phone calls, our schools were ranging from 20 minutes of direct instruction a day with some of those K1 kind of getting twice a day, 10-minute phone calls with the teachers and encouragement to read, et cetera, to 420 minutes a day, which is extraordinary. And as it turns out, things kind of settled down by May. We had the average number of kind of live instruction minutes a day was 280 minutes across all of our schools, which again is extraordinary. And as I read some of the comments in other places about what some of our colleagues in public education have been able to accomplish or have had challenges accomplishing, I think you did extraordinary things. We're going to try to also provide a few little anecdotes at that meeting, things like the micro grants that you have made to families and staff for a variety of needs that arose during the pivot to New York on pause. Like extraordinary anecdotes about what you're doing. So we're going to share a little bit of that, and then happy to kind of do a broader share if anybody is interested at some point in the future. Also wanted to just remind people that the trustees are set to vote on the state stimulus fund grants, which is a small and ever shrinking pot of money that the State University of New York Board of Trustees administers. We had twice as many requests for grants as we are able to fund, and that is heartbreaking. But there will be grants on the agenda. And I wanted to just real quickly touch on, because I know everyone's interested in guidance about what's going to happen in the fall. And I again will quote Gwendolyn Brooks, "One wants a teller in a time like this," and I don't get to be the top teller. But we at the Institute have held off a little bit in terms of putting out any guidance. Let me underscore a million times, I've heard from so many different leaders, been on the phone, here's our sample plan. Gosh, if we could get regulatory relief around this, this is what we'd like to, no promises anywhere, but it's good to know what you're thinking about. So that's super. We thought about putting out some kind of high level guidance, but at this point really feel like it would be premature because we don't have kind of a final set of what the plans will look like, or what will need to be included in those plans. But that doesn't mean that we're not interested, and that we're not standing at the ready to help you. What I'm kind of feel like I layer things on. So we've talked about, what you reach out, what you're thinking about. The thing I'm going to start to layer on now is if you are a school that is up for renewal in the next couple of years, really, if you are thinking about doing some sort of remote learning plan, the other thing that will help make us smarter about what you're doing and how we can plan things like renewal in the fall if we are unable to do live in-person renewal, be thinking about how you might show off your academic and instructional program to our team. Because if we don't have the opportunity to walk in classrooms, and from what I'm hearing, if there is some limitations on space, planning for 5 extra bodies in your building, if you only have, X number of square feet per human in the building on any given one day, may present a new set of opportunities for us in the fall. So be thinking about that. Happy to talk to you about it. And as I say, once we get some clarification from the, maybe David has a time frame, I don't, from the second floor, from the second floor, or from the state education department, then we'll be as quick as possible to get out the guidance that you need in order to get us some successful plans. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. David, we'll finish up with you for the updates.
Thanks, Yamika, and it's already been quite the week. It seems like I'm ready for Friday, to tell you the truth. But we were happy to see the outcome of the Regents meeting yesterday. There was a lot of information packed in for all schools, including charters. And so I just wanted to make sure that some of the regulations, the emergency regulations that were passed yesterday, don't go off our radar. And so there was information that was passed to give additional flexibility on high school equivalency diplomas. So we know that a lot of our overage undercredited schools have students who might take the task assessment, the replacement for the GED. And there's some flexibilities around the subtests of the assessment. Also that in order to pass a Regents exam and receive credit, or to have the Regents exam waived and have credit for that exam and that course, that was extended into the summer. So there's more flexibility now that if you do have an online summer course, and you're providing the standards and instruction, and the student passes that course, it'll count. Online administration and online coursework will count during the summer for credit, which I know is a question that many people had. In addition, there's this is particularly important for our students with disabilities, but students now can opt out of, and their families can opt out of the waiver of our Regents exams if they want. We know that many students with disabilities, particularly low incidence disabilities, rely on the services that our schools provide until they're 21 because of the very precarious transition from the K-12 support system and the adult support system in the disability community. So we don't want to push out students who maybe don't have that transition plan worked out yet. And so parents can actually decline the exemption from graduation assessment requirements. So we think that that's important. Going back to summer school, and I think this shows where we are in terms of our thinking around planning and guidance. And I think Susie spoke about it a little bit, but right now we're still working out how summer school is working. So guidance on the fall will be forthcoming, but we're finishing up planning for summer school. And so a summer school session that provides the equivalent of 45 hours of instruction is considered equivalent to a semester of work for each subject during summer school. So I just want to reiterate that you can provide online summer school instruction and it will count towards graduation requirements. There's some teacher certification exemption. So the teaching assistant certification exemption, the requirement to take certain assessments was pushed back to the end of to the beginning of 2021. Some experience requirements for teaching assistants, some data privacy requirements were pushed back. The requirement to have charter school hearings now can be pushed back to September. So that might impact some of the actions that schools, revisions, for example, or new schools, that those hearings might not take place until the fall. September, all hearings have to take place by September 30th of 2020. And so that is at the district's discretion, but that was passed as an emergency regulation yesterday. So those are some of the regulations that were discussed by the regents. They also spoke about ESSA funding and CARES Act funding, and CARES Act funding here in New York to all LEAs, including charter schools, is going to be based on Title I Part A allocations. We know that, especially for some of our smaller schools, that actually results in little to no money for them. But for many of our larger schools, particularly our schools that are serving a high number of impoverished students, which many of our schools are, that actually will result in more funding. So unfortunately, some people get less, some people get more, but an application for those funds will be forthcoming as well in further guidance. In addition, we're also thinking about what the fall semester looks like in terms of our monitoring and oversight, and we hope that we can join you in person, but we're also preparing to continue our remote monitoring protocol that we put in place for the spring. That's up on our website, and we're going to play it by ear. Unfortunately, we don't know the course of this pandemic, and so things might get worse, things might stay the same, things might get better, and we're just going to play it by ear. So we know that a lack of guidance is frustrating for schools, but I wish we had a crystal ball to tell us what the future will hold. But hopefully we can provide enough flexibility during the summer so that you can continue to help your students catch up and stay ahead, and that we will endeavor to do the same for the fall. So Yumika, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, great, thank you, David. So the first question we have for you today is about high school leaders. So I'm sure lots of high school high school graduation. The governor announced that in-person graduations could begin after June 26th, as long as they're held outdoors and with social distancing for 150 people or less. So for you, are there any considerations you would suggest or direct that schools use when making graduation plans? And we'll start with whoever wants to chime in first.
I think the Department of Health and State Ed put out some strong guidance, and I put a link in the chat for you to reference that. But we've seen some amazing creative plans that our schools are putting into place for graduation later in June, and that ranges from parades to live sessions, to recorded messages, to now we have some schools, particularly upstate, that are doing some small in-person events. I know one school that's going to a drive-in movie theater to do graduation. So, so definitely think outside the box, but we know that this is not the graduation that your students hope for, but we know that you will think outside the box to make this a memorable event for them. And we hope that this might not be you might have a ceremony now, but you might have an in-person reconvening later in the summer, if permitted.
Okay, great. Susie, do you want to add anything to that question? Nope. Aaron?
Yeah, I'll just add, I know that many schools have been spending a lot of time thinking about putting together a really awesome virtual graduation. So I would just say for folks out there who are like me and feel like, oh, now I'm allowed to do something, so I should try and make that happen. I would just encourage you to stay the course if that's the best action for your community, and don't feel like you now have to pivot to do something outside and in person, because I think to David's point, it may not be workable to invite the whole community to that size event, and there may not be space. So just allow yourself the grace to stay the course if that's the best action for your community.
Thank you. That's great advice. We've been fielding a lot of questions about CSP funding. David, can you lead off by giving some context and sharing the current status of these funds?
So we are lucky here in New York State that we were awarded the largest CSP grant in the country. We have, back in 2018, we were awarded $95.5 million, and now new and expanding charters can receive up to $1.25 million in those funds, startup and implementation funds, which is quite a far cry from when I started in the charter school office. We were awarding grants of $500,000. So it's more than doubled in the time that I've been in the charter school office. And we're lucky that we've been able to work with particularly SUNY to help write those applications and get the support we need. Unfortunately, like many things in state bureaucracy, there are a lot of hurdles to cross in order to disperse those funds. Not only internally to the state ed department, but we need to work very closely with our colleagues and friends in the comptroller's office, as well as the division of the budget, which is basically the executive's funding arm or funding office. And right now, we actually, I should say, we're very proud that we just actually cut checks for $2.1 million in funding for new charter schools to help them start strong. And I wish I had a big novelty check that I can go and give it to them. But I think that it's a huge investment in high quality public education that we can disperse $2.1 million to new charters. We're waiting for the further disbursement of almost $16 million in funding. And so the 2.1 million is I'm sure of no solace to the schools that are waiting for their funds. These are federal funds that are allocated. We appreciate your continued patience, but we want to continue to ensure that we're doing our due diligence and we're engaging in strong fiscal oversight and monitoring with our partners across state agencies to make sure that we have the continued trust and freedom to seek these types of grants and get them out with minimal paperwork and minimal red tape to charters. So we are waiting for that one hurdle, and luckily as I said, some of it was released last week, and we are looking forward to getting the rest out to schools.
Great, thank you. So next we'll go to Susie. I know a lot of schools that are waiting on these funds, and SUNY that are SUNY authorized. Do you have any updates or guidance for those schools that are still waiting to receive them?
We are, David will tell you that over the years we have been pesky partners. So if you are in a situation where you're kind of waiting for the multiple state agencies to coordinate and start things going, feel free to reach out to us. We'll try to certainly advocate and make some noise. And sometimes that means I pick up the phone and call David and make some noise to him. So be forewarned, Mr. Frank.
Yeah, and honestly, a well-placed letter sometimes is all we need to get the ball rolling. So we will try our best, but I want to stick to my talking point of the state ed department just invested $2.1 million in new charter schools across New York State. In New York City, the money went to schools in New York City and Rochester, both areas where we desperately need more high quality instruction. And that commitment is no small drop in the bucket, particularly during these perilous economic times. So New York State Education Department, investing in quality.
I also like the behind the scenes look. We'll take more of that, please. Thank you. We want to know how things really work. Thank you. Keeping with the governor's announcements, last week the governor announced that summer school can be in person for special education students. But in yesterday's Regents meeting, Chancellor Rosa seemed to indicate that decision may not be entirely final. What guidance would each of you give schools that are thinking about summer school in this context? And can schools still offer remote programs for students with IEPs?
So regarding the Chancellor's remarks, one, if you didn't see the Regents meeting yesterday, I hope that all of you will take a look, at least to see Chancellor Rosa's thoughts on charter schools and I think her firmly held beliefs in ensuring that we have transparent, fair performance measures to hold schools accountable, but also to celebrate when schools meet those standards. Not to put words in the Chancellor's mouth, I think what she was referring to, though, was that that we have ongoing conversations with the executive around the guidance that's put forth. This is a rapidly changing situation, and state ed is continuing to monitor both the impact that policies under COVID-19 have for our state's most vulnerable children, particularly students with disabilities, and what we can do to push the envelope to get those students more services and more supports. And we know from years and years of research that there's just no substitute for in-person supports, particularly for those vulnerable students. And we want to get back to that as soon as possible, but we also don't want to put the health and safety of our students in jeopardy. So I would say ongoing conversations, and we will continue to monitor the situation.
Hi, Susie. Do you want to provide an answer for that question?
An answer for, I don't know if it's an answer. I will say, I know we heard from a number of schools, kind of asking what the executive order meant, and really, I think just reflecting the abundant amount of interest on the part of parents of students with disabilities across the state that were probably for a variety of reasons very excited to understand if there might be in-person summer school possibilities for their children this summer, because they are concerned about any learning losses those students are experiencing because of New York on pause. And so, you know, the Institute lawyers kind of took a look at the wording of the executive order. It kind of took us by surprise. We didn't know it was coming out. So we took a look at the wording of the executive order, and we think, you know, unfortunately, it doesn't say throw open all of the school buildings and have your students with IEPs in. It says it's a possibility, but it kind of combines that possibility with a number of other indicators that need to be in place before you have in-person instruction. So again, happy to help think through. Some of you reached out to me, so happy to help you think through about how to, you know, talk to your parents about it and kind of what to say about what you want to do. And I know a couple of folks are, you know, reached right out, at least I think, or they are in the process of reaching out. Fair warning to my colleagues in New York City DOE. They're in co-located buildings, and so they, you know, we're going to reach out and kind of say, listen, we offer to be a part of the solution if there's a way to get into the facilities and start offering in-person instruction. So I know it's frustrating. We're trying to get as much clarity about this as quickly as we can.
Great, thank you. That was a great answer. Erin, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so nothing to add here. Just we are working on guidance for or waiting for guidance. Guidance is forthcoming, in the works, hoped for all of these outstanding questions, which will help us be able to navigate this question better.
Thank you. The Regents also announced that their reopening task force would share its recommendations, which will become SED's reopening guidance, at their July 13th meeting. The governor has also shared that his reopening council will share guidance for their schools in June, which will need to make plans. Schools will need to make plans and have them approved in July. As I'm sure you're aware, charter leaders are anxious for any clarity in terms of guidance and next steps in your role as authorizers. What timeline and next steps would you suggest, if any, that charter leaders should anticipate in terms of reopening and planning? That's a lot of question there. Aaron, I'll start with you, and we'll go to Susie, and then David, and then we'll move on to the Q&A.
I'm so sorry. I was multitasking in the chat, and I missed the question.
No problem. Question is essentially, given the task force that SED has, as well as the Governor's Reopening Council that will provide reopening guidance, do you have any information, suggestions about timelines and next steps for charter leaders in terms of anticipating the reopening?
Oh, no, I don't have anything to add there. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Hi, Susie. Would you like to provide a response to that?
I don't have, if reopening means bricks and mortar reopening, I don't have, my crystal ball does not extend that far. As David said earlier, I do think I am hearing that, there are conversations happening about use of space and the kind of how you might create an allowable use of space for humans in any particular building. I promise you people are aware of the need for PPE and an understanding of what cleaning protocols will be required to be, but I just don't, I don't have a date for when bricks and mortar will be open. Again, we anticipate that as a part of, if everything goes according to what we've heard so far, and there's an opportunity for you all to provide a plan to us. It's a kind of a strange question, by the way, to hear you guys say, when are we reopening? Because usually you kind of tell us what your calendar is. And I know we kind of got in this weird place this year where there was bleeding of the lines on that. But, if things go according to what we are hearing, and we've been hearing for a while, the schools will be able to propose a plan to us whereby you would set your calendar with a set of minimums, which is what you do every year anyway. And if there's an early start to that, then it depends really upon access to your bricks and mortar facilities and any limitations that the state or any city Department of Health might have in place in terms of the number of people that will be in that bricks and mortar location.
Okay, thank you. David, do you want to provide a response to that question as well?
I would just echo what Susie said, but we regarding the reopening task force, I shared a link to what the Regents envision in the chat. It's a task force that plans to work hand in hand with the other task forces across the state, including the governor's reopening task force. It's not a separate and independent group, but I would say that similar to that ethos, we do know that it can't happen in a vacuum, and that it does take community and does take a regional, if not statewide approach. And so we would just encourage, as schools are considering whether or not to be in session in person or remotely or a combination in the fall, that they plan for the best and set those plans accordingly to ensure that they're prepared, but come to the realization that there may be forces beyond their control that compels them to either be in session wholly remotely, partially remote, or wholly in person.
All right, thank you. So before we turn to the Q&A, there are a few additional updates. Questions that have been asked in the past, and I just want to provide those updates now. One is the requirements for the new data privacy policy. That will not go into effect in July as originally planned. That will go into effect October 1st.
That's right.
And thank you. Just another quick update is just more of maybe a statement. Everyone should know that in the meeting yesterday, the Regents openly grappled with and advocated for policies to address issues facing students who may age out of school over the summer. Stay tuned for additional updates on that topic. That was one of the topics that sort of popped up in the discussion, and there were some interesting proposals and discussions there. So more to come on that potentially, and we'll stay on that top of that and advise you. Okay, Anna, we'll go to you for the Q&A.
All right. So want to start off with a question that I think has two parts about guidance for annual reports. And so I'm breaking this into two parts because I think for folks who aren't aware, there is the statutory requirement for charter schools to submit an annual report on August 1st, but then there is also each authorizer has a requirement and a slightly different format for their more, say substantive narrative, if you will, annual report. So would love, David, if you could speak to any crystal ball gazing about whether or not the statutory timing will be waived. And then if each authorizer could speak to their thinking about the sort of larger, more narrative component of the annual report and how you all are thinking about that.
Yeah, so the timeline for the annual report is set forth in law. It's Education Law 2857, subsection 2. And there has not been an executive order that has changed that statutory requirement. And so therefore we don't have the power to unilaterally push it back. It's set forth in law. We don't write the laws, your legislators do. And so we do plan on releasing guidance on the annual report shortly. Actually, right after this call, I have a 5:30 meeting with my staff for us to go over the annual report. We've met with both SUNY and the New York City DOE, and even reached out to Buffalo, which has 2 charters, to talk about what the requirements are. And so we've finalized that. We're hoping to get the guidance and portal open this week. You know, I should promise early next week and under promise and over deliver. So we're doing that. Regarding authorizer specific requirements, all of our requirements for annual report submission are in the portal. This year, the exception is anything financial related. That'll be reported as usual in November. And we're requiring everything to be submitted through the ESSA Fiscal Transparency Report. And we're working closely with our education finance team to ensure that the questions in the annual report from years past on finance, if they're not duplicated in other areas of the ESSA Fiscal Transparency Reporting, are brought over to that new portal. Plus, you'll submit your budget and your audited financials and management letter through that portal, and we're building that out. We have a work group of authorizers and education finance professionals and school leaders and education and finance leaders. Actually, Barbara Achenauer from SUNY is one of the key stakeholders in that. And Barbara's done an amazing job putting together, her and her team, John Flax and Connor LeClaire, put together that amazing guidance document. So thank you, Susie, for lending their talents to that. So we're working on that. There are some aspects of the annual report that are authorizer specific, but it's all through that portal that you guys have used in the past. So that's all the news that I think is fit to print for the annual report. Susie?
I'm happy to pop in. So we did try to align as much as we possibly could for the one ask. There are SUNY charter schools have to submit an annual accountability plan progress report. This year, I'm kind of interested in what you determined, what you defined as your assessment needs are by the end of the year. that is due a little bit later in the year. We may expand a few questions here or there in that document. And then SUNY authorized charter schools should anticipate that at some point this fall, we are going to do a follow-up survey, and we'll be happy to coordinate with the other authorizers, but we are going to do a follow-up survey to the Credo survey that was done just last month, just to kind of, again, record what's happening with you in the fall and get a little bit additional school-specific data.
Great, thanks. Erin, anything to add?
Yeah, so our deadlines for our authorizer-specific reporting currently are scheduled to be the same as they were last year. Currently, they're scheduled to be all the same elements. So no big changes foreseen there. But if schools are reviewing the handbook and they're seeing that there are elements that they're concerned about submitting on those timelines, please definitely reach out. And we will be, as I've mentioned, I think on earlier calls, for those charters that are going through renewal this upcoming year, we will be sharing more guidance this summer.
Great, thank you. I'm going to try to hit two last things super quickly and then hand it off to Corey and Anjali. So very quickly, Marcia asked a question about guidance on what to send out to families regarding the declination of the waiver for the Regents exemption. And it looks like someone tried to offer her a resource of a document that, and it looks like Sandy Lee put another one up there. Marcia, I would just say, I think this is a great crowdsourced moment for something from other schools. So if you want to drop your email in the chat, and if anyone has a letter that they are confident in and want to share, like Sandy, feel free to send it to her via the chat. I think that's probably easier unless any of the authorizers have really strong feelings about or have already drafted something. Looks like no. Okay, great. All right, so then last thing before we go to DOE, New York City DOE specific topics. Question here about the SED digital survey. And so we talked about this briefly a couple weeks ago. And my understanding, David, was that the perspective is that this is not technically required from charters, but is a good citizen effort. In the context of the question that's being asked about potentially requiring some effort to resurvey families, anyone, but I'll look at you first, David, because it's your department's good citizen effort, thoughts about sort of the relative investment in time and energy that people should be thinking about undertaking or asking for families to undertake in order to participate in that survey.
I don't think I said that it wasn't required, but I'll have to go back and look. What I would say is that it was sent out. That's,
okay.
But,
my ears. My
right.
school operator ears heard that David didn't say that it was required, so maybe I should reframe that.
But I mean, my own personal belief, and that's saying, I'm saying this because I don't have to do the work to fill out the survey, but I do know, I've had school leaders and operations staff tell me it's taken them 5 to 10 minutes to fill out, is the more charter schools participate, the more we have a seat at the table, the better. And it's in part, it's to one, normalize that you are teachers and educators and your students are students. You're not, green-headed Martians from some other planet, but we are a real school. And also, I think it's also to highlight the great work that your schools are doing. I think compared to some schools here in New York State, and Susie highlighted some of those amazing statistics for the SUNY authorized schools before, it's exemplary. So I do hope that you will share the work that you're doing. I would counsel you to do the best you can to answer those questions. If you feel you need to resurvey your students, then go ahead. But I would, and I hope you're reading. I hope you're hearing what I'm saying. But I would.
How about I take a stab and then you can
go.
do
Anna and I
like
are
a
on the same.
disagree. Yeah.
Do your best.
Do your best, and maybe some back of the envelope participation is appropriate if it's a huge lift to get specific family generated information. All right, I said it.
You said it, not me, Anna.
I said it, not David. Awesome. Well, I'll hand it over to Corey and Anjali for New York City DOE specific topics.
Before you do, I do want to say one thing. You mentioned before, actually, Yomika mentioned about watching the Regents meetings. And I think people get a sense of what happens at Regents meetings because they are online now. Unlike the SUNY trustee meetings, normally these meetings are not televised. Normally you have to come to Albany to see them. And it doesn't mean that those conversations are only happening now because you can see what's happening. A lot of work, a lot of engagement happens to get the results that happen. So, I think that it was great that everyone can see the process. I would encourage you to continue to stay engaged with your communities. And, it was really heartening to see the importance that communities across the state put on the Regents' deliberations this week, but in general. I do want to point out that it's not always televised. And it is now because of COVID-19, but that's not to mean that they will be in the future.
I think that's a great flag, David, and I will just say for folks, our thinking after yesterday's meeting and the hundreds of people who watched on Facebook Live is that part of what we can offer to folks is also an alert about when those charter topics are coming up, because the meetings can be 4 to 6 hours long, and there's a general sense of when charter topics will begin, but not necessarily a specific timestamp. So if that's something that you're interested in signing up to be alerted to in the future, whether you join via our Facebook live stream or you join via the stream that is available on the SED Regents website, either way, but saves if for folks who are interested in watching, and I do recommend it, it will save you some time of hearing the other super important, fascinating work of the Regents. All right, so now for real this time, apologies, Corey and Anjali, but over to you.
That's all right. I will add, as a New York City dweller, I've had to go up a few times to Albany to see the Regents in person, so it has been a nice benefit, if you can call it that, to have it televised live. And I would hope that this would continue after COVID-19, even if they go back. I know, David, you have no control over these things, but SUNY has been telecasting their meetings forever. So we're hopeful we'll get there with SED as well. So I just want to start, we've got a couple things to run through with DOE specific. Anjali, I've broken it up again kind of by category. So let's start with summer, because I think that's the most immediate. And so schools are still very interested in when the policy is going to come out from DOE for those in co-located space about how to close out the school year, which is a combination of collecting supplies, students potentially having access, all of that.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Corey, and hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Yes, so we are a bit behind on that document, on that guidance document. We were, expecting to release it early this week, and it looks like it's more likely to be released tomorrow, Wednesday, or Thursday. So look out for either an email from us tomorrow or see weekly on Thursday.
Okay, we're looking for it this week.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And then also schools are interested in the summer school registration for those that sometimes have had their students participate in DOE summer school.
Mm-hmm. Right, so we are also working on this, Corey, with our summer school team. As you know, summer plans change very quickly. So right now the process, we're still finalizing, but it's likely gonna look very similar to what happened in the past, except without the form that schools had to fill out. It's likely gonna be a combination of school leaders reaching out to district principals or school admins about seat availability for specific classes or programs. So look out for more information later this week as well.
Okay. And then last question, I think that is related to this time is schools are looking for when they would be able to complete and get access to work in facilities for their classrooms, maybe during the summer or now. What should schools do if they're looking for answers to that?
And Corey, this is work through the matching process, or?
This is for co-located schools that are interested in trying to get some work done in their school.
Oh, great. So they should follow the regular process, right? So you have to fill out the third party information with Tom Taraco's team. And we're happy to connect you with them if you're having any trouble reaching them.
Couple questions, they come in all the time. Any idea on when the DOE is going to publish their school calendar?
Hottest question, Corey. Not yet. I'm told that this is coming very soon. Definitely before the end of this school year. So
that's something. That is something. End of school year is soonish. Okay.
Yeah.
Schools are anxiously awaiting. Also for next year, schools are wondering, is there any updates either from school food or Office of Transportation around what services charters in New York City will be able to count on for next year?
Unfortunately, no updates on that, Corey.
And I know Erin already addressed it, but I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to say about what students who have disabilities that are eligible for year-round services on their IEP. And I just want to take a moment to clarify, because we did receive a question. Charters, a lot of charters have students with disabilities who receive services in the summer, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have a designation of a year-round IEP, which would require services. And so anything you wanted to add about DOE's thinking on providing services to students who have the year-round services on their IEP in person?
No, nothing to add, Corey. We've been working, since this was released on Friday, to sort of figure out how this would sort of work. As you know, going back to buildings in person is a huge lift, and so I don't know is the quick answer. And some schools, for you know who you are, you've been reaching out to us. Please be patient with us. We're hoping to have at least some preliminary information this week as to how this is going to move forward.
Okay. And then I think the last question I've gotten is, are there any lessons that DOE has learned from the rec centers that they can share with schools as they're preparing to move forward with their own plans, whether it's around social distancing or what happened when students and or staff got sick at rec centers? How were any of the policies and procedures handled?
It's a great question, Corey. I've raised this came up before, and I've raised this with the team. And I'll plan to have more information on this in another meeting. I don't think next week is feasible, but maybe the week after.
Okay. And I think that's all I had, and I don't see any other questions in the chat. So unless you have something to add, I think we can wrap up.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That wraps up for today. I just want to remind everyone that on Thursday, the 11th, come back and join us for our Thursday Deep Dive webinar, Race, Justice, and Equity, a series of conversations. This will be our first event in our new conversation series that will happen monthly, and we are delighted to have the Honorable Carl Hasty, Speaker of the New York State Assembly, Honorable Ruben Diaz, Jr., Bronx Borough President, and Dr. Dana Collins, the President-elect of New York Association of Black Psychologists. How do we fight racial injustice and equity? Let's talk race and empowerment. See you Thursday at 4 p.m.